Right. Hey, folks. Hey, welcome to a new show. I had a challenge whilst the 30-second countdown was going to eat my banana, and I failed. So there's a bit of banana stuck in my, a bit of banana stuck in my throat. But welcome, folks, to Common Sense Live. It is a joy to have you with us. This is a week where we talk about the week's current affairs, news stories. We also have a big debate where we talk about really important issues and get perspectives from different sides of the political spectrum. I'm joined today by a new host, Busia Twins. How are you doing?
Ooh, hold for applause. Do we have that kind of like tech yet?
No, we don't have a budget yet, unfortunately.
But yeah, thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this. I'm looking forward to, being a regular host on this. And yeah, hopefully people don't hate me by the end of this. So let me use the time where I'm neutral. Do you know what I mean? Neutral reviews.
This is like when you start a new series, you're not deep in enough yet to work out if you hate it or not. It's still new.
Exactly.
I think people will love you. I mean, we've had you as a guest many times before. You actually used to write for us a while ago. And so it's great to be able to do something like this moving forward. I'm looking forward to it. What might people be shocked to know about you?
Shocked? I don't know.
Or surprised? Shocked makes it sound negative.
Yeah. Surprised. I guess in terms of this area of work, I wasn't a big reader until I turned like 20, 21. People were shocked by that. Yeah, reading wasn't for me. I just never really liked it. You would have to force me, do you know what I mean, to read and stuff like that. So yeah, I didn't really like reading, but now much more. And it has to be non-fiction. Fiction for me is so hard. So any fiction requests, let me know. But yeah, reading was never something I really was interested in.
That is quite surprising because you talk a lot about the world and society and how to reorganize society and stuff like that. So how did you learn all that stuff? Is it from TV shows or school?
Yeah, I think it was family, of course. Like my dad's Muslim, my mom's Christian. So from that kind of angle, he would also bring into the house like the stuff that's going on with the Middle East. And then you'll be like, oh, curious, kind of that stuff. I guess watching the news. And then, non-fiction articles. And then just having conversations. So it's more like, quote unquote, like the natural way people educate themselves rather than like reading someone's opinion, because all you're going to get in a book is the opinion of that person, right? It was more like, okay, let me talk to different people. And I'm from Camden Town, so it was very multicultural. So you're always going to get different people's perspective on the same issue. So that's where I really learned stuff. And obviously university, yeah.
Love that. Well, listen, we're going to find out obviously way more about you as we go on. Folks, if this is your first time, obviously be sure to hit the subscribe button, right? And become a member of the family. But even before you do that, let us know where you're watching from. We've got the chat function and we love engaging with people, reading their comments, getting stuck. And we've got a really interesting debate today. So no doubt you're going to want to be typing. Just let us know where you're watching from. And of course, the hashtag is Common Sense Live. And if you want us to read your tweets or anything like that, you can just tweet Common Sense Live and you can get involved. Like I said, lots of interesting things to get through. And of course, that big debate later on, all about women and keeping women safe. First story I'll talk about and get your thoughts on, Busia, is, of course, just last week we had finally the settlement for the George Floyd family. Everyone knows who George Floyd is. It pretty much was a global story we all were looking at last year. Now, on Friday, the 12th of March, the family obviously previously had for a civil rights lawsuit against the city and the 4 officers that we know were charged. Now, the Minneapolis City Council have agreed to pay the George family $27 million, 19 million pounds to settle the lawsuit. When you read this, Busia, when you saw it, what were your instinctive thoughts? Is this kind of victory? Is this justice? Do we just move on now? What?
It's hard, anytime you read something like this, you have to I guess you have to compartmentalize what the family is owed and then what this conversation represents. What are we owed potentially as Black people, Black Americans, or Black people worldwide? So the word justice for us, it will never really be justice until society changes, people are convicted and laws change, systems change. That's the ultimate justice, because this represents, in the grand scheme of things, a historical journey from the civil rights movement and prior to now. So we're kind of looking at it like, well, nothing's really changed unless things really change. The settlement for the family, of course, is something. Many families go without anything at all. Many families go without even an acknowledgement. So there's an element of, okay, cool. The attitude towards understanding that you cannot leave this conversation without some sort of, I guess, I can't really call it, compensation is there. But hopefully the conviction is what everyone's looking for and waiting for. So it's that kind of pedal that. So yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, one thing people should be aware of is Derek Chauvin, who people are, have been tweeting about as well. In the actual law case or the law trial, we've seen things move away from first-degree murder to third-degree murder to manslaughter, and it's called whichever one it is. And that's another point of contention for people. What's going on here? Is he going to get the justice he's due? But also, can you really put a price on what happened last year? I mean, what's the right price, if you like, that's fitting for that? But it's interesting. We're following the story. In fact, we should have a news article written about this in the coming week. So if you're interested in finding out about that, commonsense.co.uk or TCS Network rather is where you can go. The second story is really interesting. It's domestic. It's all about a beacon of hope. This is the UK vaccine story. This is a new film, a new video that's coming soon. We found out about this on the 10th of March, and essentially Downing Street tweeted a trailer for a documentary celebrating the UK's coronavirus vaccine effort. And, do we have the video to play for folks, or we have that ready? Just give me hands up if we is he letting me know? Do we have the video? Can we play the video? I don't have it. Okay, I'm gonna guess we don't have it because no one's saying anything. I can see you folks, and no one's telling me if we have the video. I guess we don't have it. When you saw the documentary, maybe you haven't seen it, the trailer. What did you think? Are you excited about this new story that's coming out? This new film that's coming out, Basayo?
I mean, no. It's a very touchy subject. We're still in lockdown, right? So it's kind of sometimes a bit like too soon. And then also you've got dominant comments that just come out, I'm not sure if it's today or yesterday, actually blaming the Department of Health and our approach, someone who was the inside man. So it's kind of like you can see the people they've kind of like plucked off are coming back to obviously get their book deal to kind of reveal the truths of what's happened behind closed doors. So clearly it's not something that they need to read the room. Do you know what I mean? They never do, but I think it's one of those ones where they're trying to have an early or a premature victory, where actually people are like, you know what, we haven't left our houses yet. There's a lot of people who it's very real, in terms of they've got family members that are dead. So for you to turn around and say we handled it well, to them it's like, well, maybe it was my family's or friends or close one's life disposable, So it's just one of those. It's another vanity project. And we know that governments will do this or organizations will do this to kind of psychologically make you feel you're in a better situation than you are in. But as I said, until we leave lockdown,
no one consider it. I was jumping in there to say, when I think about the Conservatives right now, I think they really think they've smashed it. I know that I can help not to kind of appear smug, because you don't want to appear smug as a government presiding over a pandemic. But there's a smarminess about Dominic Raab and Matt Hancock, like just kind of like, we've smashed this. And Rishi Sunak with these carefully, crafted pictures in the park, and Matthew Hancock jumping randomly over railings, and
his flared trousers.
There's a smarminess about them, and only a smarmy government would, in the middle of a lockdown, go, you know what people need? A film about how good we've done. This is like, what?
You know what? It goes to show. What were the strategies that worked in the past to convince us that we were in a better position than we were in? Maybe when we look back, it's like, this is probably something they've always done. But because now we're just, our eyes have been tuned into the news, we're like, actually, that's whack. You know what I mean? So I think they've underestimated how much we've been following this from a scientific point of view, from a policy point of view. And they think they can this is not Brexit, where you can, tell us that, show us one image and get us to vote to leave the country. This is genuinely something that we're all experiencing. This is not really a party political debate. You know what I mean? It's human beings really saying how they feel. So, yeah.
Will be interesting to see if anyone actually watches it when it comes out. Of course, another platform that wants to stop us watching films is Netflix, because they're cracking down on password sharing. I know this is going to get some people's hearts racing, because they're going, who have I given my passwords to, or whose password am I using? But again, this is a story that came out, again, 11th of March. Sky and Wired have broken the story. And essentially, Netflix is trialing a crackdown on password sharing. where accounts users now have to enter a 2-factor code authorization. And some people have been getting, messages already telling them to verify they live with the account holders. I feel like you're like, this story stinks. But
It's not fair.
Are you one of these people that shares your Netflix passwords with people?
Do you know what? Yeah, I count family as people in it. So I share it with my family, and our families can extend depending on the week, depending on the day. So, you know what I mean?
Across the Atlantic, I'm guessing.
Across the Atlantic. And do you know what it is? It's not just that, it's also the number of devices, right? So these days, a lot of us have 3-4 devices that count as people, apparently, allegedly, would seem. So that's a bit of a tricky situation. So I'm not fond of it. Because it's sad, we've always had this kind of undercover economy where, one person buys it and you eat off of it. But saying that, again, in the context of a lockdown, some people's last hope was Netflix, and we have to understand that it wasn't just streaming, it wasn't just TV, it was very much like a lifeline for a lot of people. So maybe as we come out of lockdown, I'll be more like, okay, fair enough, pay your dues. But for now, I feel like be careful because, a lot of people needed it to survive. But as I said, you can't tell me, you can't tell me who my family is, you know what I mean? You can't tell me.
Undercover economy. That's a new term for folks who are, quite frankly, I don't say breaking the law, but I do have a problem with people who don't. I have a Netflix. I've had Netflix for what, 5 years, and I've never given my password to anyone. I just don't believe in people getting it. I just think you should pay. If you're gonna watch Netflix, you should pay.
Okay. You think people should? So you're using the word "pay your dues" basically to watch.
That's it.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
No, the question I ask for you is because you've already given yourself up. Like I know you've got a large family. Let's put it that way. The question I want to ask is: are you the password giver? I.e., do you give your passwords to other people, or are you the password taker? Namely, you're a freeloader on someone else's account.
No, I pay for mine. Because I don't like the concept of relying on someone else's. For me, I don't mind breaking the law in terms of oversharing, but for me to be the one begging, it can't be me. That's just the ego thing. But but at the same time, wait, how many people are allowed on one account?
I think it depends on what the plan you go for, but the normal plan, I believe you're allowed 2 different devices, and that's it. And
I think
like 5 and 4.
Yeah, so I think maybe I'm on the family plan. I'm not sure. So maybe I'm allowed, I don't know, a bigger, a lot more. But I think realistically, the number of devices people have in these days is more than 2. It's more than 3 a lot of the time. So I think even that in that concept, I'd like to know what the logic was behind it. But I think it's always a case of these things are supposed to be innovative, right? When they first come in, it's supposed to be like, wow, okay, cool. Then as they become the mainstream, creativity is always then regulated in a particular way. Where I think Netflix and that are trying to be like, they're trying to balance that idea of being creative and innovative, but also being very much mainstream, and that's their confusion they're having. So you have to accept either you're going to be the underground innovative thing trying to break mainstream TV, or you accept you're the new TV, and now you want to basically what they want us is pay TV license. That's their version. They're basically
the TV license thing is so interesting to me. I still get the letters. I don't watch live TV. I don't watch BBC iPlayer, but I still get the letter. And now I think you have to tell people. You have to tell them that you're not watching live TV, and the default is they charge you. That's what I received. It was like, you need to tell us you're not watching live TV. And I thought that's odd. And I'm not doing something. So it's the assumption I'm just gonna watch live. It's really weird. But anyways,
all very British people.
All very interesting stuff, of course. There's been a debate that's been pretty much circling all around. And in fact, before we go, I want to find out, the viewers we have, are you folks freeloaders? I would like to know. If you're listening to this, do comment. Are you the type of person who freeloads and just uses other people's accounts, or do you give up your account willingly? Are you a kind of this altruistic? Do you just share your wealth and your affluence with everybody else?
Are you a socialist consumer? Do you know what I mean? That's what we call it. How you worded it is very charged. You should ask them, do you have an extended family? Do you know what I mean? Or do you know what I mean? It's communism, the thing that I
can't condone this. I just can't condone this. But I have to stand for what's right. And if you ask me, people have to pay their due. That's what I think. But anyways, let's move on to this really interesting debate discussion. And get some amazing guests on. Torrin there says he flows with his chest. Someone says screenshot that and send it to oh, it's gone. Why is it gone? Let's bring it back up. Someone should screenshot this and send it. Is this doxing? Is this known as doxing? I'm joking. Right. Let's move on to the debate, because to more serious things, this last week we've seen social media erupt with all sorts of different debates and discussions, especially following the tragic death of Sarah Everard. Right, this is a 33-year-old woman who did now her walk from Clapham, to Brixton. Her body was found in Ashford, Kent, and Wayne Cousins, who is actually a Metropolitan Police officer, has been arrested and charged in connection to the kidnapping and the murder of Miss Everard. Now, he's already appeared in court, and we know that story was super sad. We saw lots of people writing condolences and talking about it online, and of course, since that death, lots of people have been having a go at giving ideas as to how we can maybe ensure something like this never happens again, how we can protect more women. And one of the policies, I guess, that was most polemic, that was most charged, was one proposed by Baroness Jenny Jones in the House of Lords. She's a Green peer. And she said, essentially, that what we need to do to keep women safe moving forward is essentially impose a 6 p.m. curfew for men, right? Ban all men from going outside past 6 p.m. And this curfew for men would be what would, make things much easier. Now, as you can imagine, that's very divisive, and pretty much a few hours later, curfew for men was trending on social media. And we've seen lots of people fall by the wayside by virtue of trying to get involved with the debate. We had Davina McCall, who said something a bit odd, and that got her pretty much cancelled. We've had Mark Deacon, a Tory councillor, said something else. Let's just engage with the policy first and foremost. This idea of banning men and like hard curfew. What are your instinctive reflections on this side before we get our wonderful guests involved?
I think the way it was presented, I think I saw a TV presenter actually say that it was more to highlight how ridiculous the situation is, in the sense that if women cannot leave their house because of men, then therefore it should be the men that are banned from coming outside. It wasn't in all seriousness, as far as I was aware of it, but she's trying to highlight that actually, what is the solution here? So I think that's what it is, and it just shows people's knee-jerk reaction was you're more angry about saying ban, men from going outside, than to be like, actually, this is women's everyday reality, just not in so many words. So it just was more about how you heard it and how you responded than what she actually said. So at the end of the day, if it was anybody else, if it was any other incident, you would say, take those people off the street if you are the perpetrator. So in this circumstance, because we believe that it's ridiculous that men should not be on the streets, that we're kind of actually believing that is something ridiculous to say. But you know what? At the end of the day, if society isn't going to change, we need drastic action, and people can't lose their lives because of things that we call culture or things that we call misogyny. And so, so we need to find a solution to it.
No, I take your point, and obviously we're going to get lots of different perspectives. Let's start with Aaron, who is a writer at Crackdown. Aaron, can you hear us? You're a bit fuzzy for me. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you. Evening.
Superb. Good. Thank you for coming on. Let's just get straight into it before lots of perspectives are in the room. What are your thoughts, man? When you heard that proposal, what did you think?
I mean, at best, I thought it was just another left-wing loony having a go at it. But after a while, I thought down a deep ten, it was like, if this was to ever be passed, it would, I don't know what it would do. It will create this kind of class system where the entire male gender is now responsible for the actions of a few. I would think that it's just blatant discrimination. I think it's just pure misandry, if I'm honest with you. Second of all, I'm not quite sure how you would enforce that. There wouldn't be any consideration for men, for example, who work on sociable hours, men who work through the night, for example. How would you realistically enforce that how would you enforce that realistically? I mean, most police officers are men. If men are banned, there can be no police officers on the street anyway. So I'm not quite sure how you could enforce that realistically. I don't know. Plus, there's also a side of it where I think
one of the things, I don't know if you can hear me, but one of the things Basai was talking about was that, well, maybe this wasn't serious. Like it was, her, Baroness Jenny Jones, trying to start a conversation, and stuff like that, you know. But even still,
I don't know. I don't know.
I mean,
if with the green. Okay, go on.
Sorry, I was going to say, if it's a case that it's unrealistic, because we know that it's not realistic, right, for every man to be banned. It's not something that's going to happen, even if they said it. Then therefore, the anger that people have towards what she said is kind of just ridiculous. Like someone saying, let's have dragons in the zoos. If you know it's not going to happen, then why would you be so outraged by it? What she was trying to say, and I think what people should choose to see, is not the fact that men will be locked up, because as you said, realistically, they serve, they're on the streets at different hours for different jobs and for different reasons, and it's a quote unquote not all men, because that makes people feel a lot comfortable. However, if women in their day-to-day life feel unsafe for years and years and years, what are men willing or society willing to do to ensure that these people can live their lives and we address the real problem? So I feel like it's a conversation that welcomes everyone to say, you know what, we've got a real issue and we've got victims. The conversation shouldn't be actually, well, if we stop men from going on the streets, then yeah, they might be safe. But are we prioritizing the economic income of men versus the safety of women? That's a different conversation. Because I could argue that even if I believed in what she said, my right is that the safety of women comes before whether men are working at night or not.
Gotcha. I'm going to bring on
at the same time, though.
Hold on 1 minute, Aaron. I'm going to bring on Robin, who's a social commentator. She talks about things like this and lots of other issues. I know she's particularly passionate about feminism, and so I just want to get your thoughts on this, Robin. When you listen to kind of what Aaron said, what Bosiah said in response, you know, do you think this is a policy that, say, we should take seriously? Could it actually happen? I mean, what are your thoughts on it?
I also believe that it wasn't a serious proposal, but building off of the idea of not taking into consideration men who would be working at night past 6 o'clock. If you reverse that the other way around, we could speak about the women who work late at night and then have to walk home or have to get in a taxi home, and they don't feel safe around the men that may approach them at that time. So you can see it from both angles, realistically. And like's been said, it's not something that is going to come into action. It's not realistic, so you can't really get completely outraged by it.
Aaron, you're frozen for me. Are you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
I can hear you. All good.
Yeah, I was gonna say I understand what both of you are saying to a certain degree. However, it does presuppose the idea that women are in inherently more danger than men are on the street as well. Men are more likely to get robbed or stabbed or be part of some kind of violent altercation past a certain time in the night as well. It's not supposed to be a competition, but it's not. I don't want us to get involved in this idea that danger in itself is inherently a female phenomenon. It's not something that affects females only. That's all I'm saying. 100%. It's not to say that you know, for every woman that gets raped, a man gets attacked. This is not a competition, because they're both equally abhorrent, in my opinion. But it's the idea that the way that it's phrased, in my opinion, is that it seems to be that it's worse for women to get raped than it is for men to get stabbed or mugged or carjacked or whatever it is. You know, and I know I know it's not to do with like the economic side of men and things like that, but at the same time, let's just say, for example, this law was to pass and men would get banned, right? In terms of work, the people who are proposing this law, who would pay those bills? I know we're not trying to get into the economic side of it, because I get that, but at the same time, they still got to pay rent. They still have to have a roof over their heads. Who's going to pay those bills? Who's going to pay
Aaron.
that?
Hold on, Bosiah. Hold on. I just want to bring on our last speaker, so then we've got the full deck and we can get into some of these issues. Folks, I know you're ready to respond, and I just say, hold on for 1 minute. Hamish. Hamish is gone. Is he back? Superb. Hey, Hamish. Just want to get your thoughts instinctively before we get straight into it on what Aaron has said. I mean, he said that danger isn't a specifically or particularly female phenomenon. It's something everyone goes through. When you look at the story, is that your perspective too? That everyone's in danger. We need to protect everybody, or do you see things differently?
Slightly. I agree slightly with Aaron. However, I still think there's a time where I think we have to, even though, yes, we need to raise certain men's experiences, if that's like mental health, if that's what Aaron's mentioned in terms of stabbing, I also think we cannot raise it in response to... Hello, can you hear me?
Can hear you all good.
Yeah, okay, cool. In terms of just, we can't say it in response to women's experiences, for example. Like, I think in doing that, it pushes down women's experiences to like a lower, in terms of like, you know, lower. I think we can't do that in my eyes. I think, especially like looking at the trend in terms of all the hashtag, like not all men, I think it's very rude and very irresponsible. I think we have to hear these experiences from women in terms of like violence, in terms of that. So I think, as much as I agree with Aaron, yes, in terms of like men's, you know, getting stabbed and stuff like that, we cannot say that in response to, you know, women's experiences. I think we have to listen and not, you know, have to listen to this in that sense. So I agree to an extent with Aaron. However, we have to do it in such a way to not downplay the experiences of women as well. So that's where I come from. That
I
sense.
think.
Hold on. I'm gonna jump back to Basaya because I know she wanted to speak before Aaron, and then we'll come straight to you. But yeah, go ahead, Basaya.
Yeah, I wanted to say that as much as I like the balanced kind of approach that people try and do, like I hear both sides, I think it just shows the privilege that people have to try and see both sides. This is about people victims of this is someone who was murdered and women who are sexually harassed and raped. This is not something about, you know, someone's tripped over on the street where we can go, I don't know what's happened, right? And we obviously know that if this happened to someone that you knew, you'll take a different response and different approach to it. Number two, I feel like when we talk about the patriarchy, a lot of the things that people talk about is the fact that everybody's a victim of the patriarchy. So when you talk about knife crime, is it women killing men on knife crime? Because you can argue that it's men at the hands of other men that are victims of knife crime or other reported crimes. Because obviously we don't know how many crimes that are underreported that are the perpetrators of women, and we accept that. But of what is reported, if we want to have that conversation about men being victims of crime, who are the perpetrators of that crime? If it's other men, then it adds to the conversation of how do we make sure we live in a society where men aren't a threat to people in general. Now, the conversation about Sarah Everard and about sexual harassment that we're talking about is about the reasons why this happened is because of their gender. So we're looking at it in terms of why is it that women feel that because of your gender that you are most at risk of facing harm. Nobody said we monopolize harm. Nobody says we monopolize victimhood. What we are saying is that as a gender, as a group of people, we don't stand for that. And we welcome men to also not stand for their violence. But it's not based on our movement or movement that defends us that you will now pick at that. Everyone has their opportunity. So maybe, Aaron, I'm not sure what you do in your spare time, but maybe if you were also leading the movement to say that, men shouldn't be killing men on knife crime, you would understand. No one said you shouldn't do that. But it's not that you have to hyper, scrutinize a movement. That all it's saying is that women have been victims for over years and years and years. This is a conversation that might be new to the consciousness of the mainstream conversation. Fine. To our generation, fine. But as women has been expressing throughout the week, this is something they live in and day out. This is the fears they have from their parents. When we talk about family or when we talk about going to work, what has that got to do with anything? The patriarchy allows you to even have certain jobs. So right. When we talk about, sorry.
No, please finish. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so sorry. So I was trying to say, when we look at the root cause of all of this, when we look at the patriarchy, it all comes in together. We talk about economics, right? It's the fact that men have access to certain jobs at certain times because you believe that women are less likely to be able to perform these jobs well, etc., etc. So when we look at it from a point of it's the patriarchy versus all of us. Not men versus women. And if you see that, you won't see yourself as a victim or being penalized by this conversation. In fact, you should want this conversation to happen and go, yeah, you know what? Because I'm not that man, I have nothing to be upset about. But it makes us a bit
I was just going to jump in there just to say, I hear everything you're saying. Of course, that presupposes you just made a case that your argument is from the lenses of patriarchy. So one has to be fully sold and part of the patriarchy, lens team to see the things quite the way you're seeing it. Aaron,
stats-wise shows that if you look at who is the victim of crime, even if you don't believe in the patriarchy, it's still men perpetrating these crimes. Unless you can show me that women are the biggest perpetrator of these crimes, then we have a conversation. So don't believe in the patriarchy, that's fine. Just like some people don't see race, that's fine. It's up to you if you want to diagnose yourself with such blindness.
I don't think they're quite the same thing, though. Because
it is, because the stats prove it.
When you say the stats prove patriarchy,
the stats prove patriarchy. The stats prove that economically, socially, and politically, men benefit from this order. So that's what the patriarchy is. There's nothing else. There's nothing scientific about the patriarchy. It is what it is. So whether statutorily, whether it's experience-wise.
So let's go on that. And you said men benefit from this order, but you just said, like the people most likely to face some of the crimes we're talking about is men, at the hands of other men. So how is that men benefiting from the patriarchy?
because you still have power to expend on other men. Because if men identify other men that they don't believe fits in with their archetype of what a real man is, they will suffer from it. Just like when you see men who are gay or men who don't fit that hyper-masculine trope, they are also penalized by it. So it does benefit men, because in different scenarios, different systems, a man who is gay might still benefit from something. But in terms of violent crime against people from the LGBT community, they'll suffer from it. It's not just one lens. The patriarchy is interconnected systems. At different times of your life, you benefit. Just like this system might benefit white people, but I have my own privileges within the system. I might be a university educated person, so I still have privileges within a white system. It doesn't exonerate me. However, in particular lenses, particular institutions, I can recognize my privileges and also my forms of oppression. That's how it's always been. Got you. Aaron, I know you're going to say something, and then we'll come back to Robin, because I know we lost you, but you're back now. But yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
I was going to say, I think the reason why the hashtag Not All Men hashtag was trending is because the Green Party lady said that men should have a curfew. She didn't distinguish between the good men and the bad men. She just said all men. So obviously people are going to start to distinguish themselves from other people. No one wants to be lumped in with that same group. I think that's probably the reason why. That's what I want to say, really. It's just about trying to make sure that you're not lumped in with that group. That's probably the reason why there's such a backlash, because if it were the other way around, and if a man had said a woman shouldn't be doing this and be doing that, then there'll be civil war, there'll be all kinds of madness. So I don't see how it's more acceptable to talk about men in that way, but not women. Because apparently women... But no, that's a different story. But yeah.
All right, go ahead, Robin.
I'd say, first of all, no one has said it's all men, ever. But what has been said that was released last week is that 97% of women and girls in the UK have been sexually harassed or assaulted. And that whole idea of like, if all men were to be locked in their house after 6 o'clock, and that's because you can't distinguish between the bad guys and the good guys, then from a woman's point of view, she can't distinguish either. Therefore, she is going to feel in danger no matter who the man is, because statistically, you are more likely to be assaulted by someone that you already know than a complete stranger. So there's no circumstance where you can tell the difference between a good guy and a bad guy.
Yeah. I take that point. I mean, just to consider some people's comments, and folks, please keep your comments coming in. We want your thoughts on them. I'll just go straight to Isaac. Isaac said that we need to create some safe spaces for women. Do you feel free to kind of flesh that out? What do you mean by that? Michael Mpofu, he said something about that the argument is getting muddled, and there's some basic facts that we need to agree to. Mike, feel free to let us know what those facts are, of course. Now, folks, I know we're talking about lots of different things, and there's lots that's been said. I guess what I want to zone in on for a little while, at least, is radical as this policy proposal is there anyone who would like to see this happen, or who just thinks, no, it's good enough because it's helping us have a conversation, but it shouldn't actually happen?
So I think it's created a conversation, which is good. However, that conversation hasn't led to solutions in that sense. So, for example, I've seen one solution where it was like having police officers in nightclubs, which in my eyes is, and people can disagree with me here, but I think it's a very stupid idea. And I kind of think the government's been very tone deaf with this policy in terms of proposing something like this, especially after what's happened with Sarah Everard. So I find that the 6 p.m. proposal has created a good conversation. However, the proposals behind it, like any solutions out of it, away from it, hasn't happened yet. Labour Party have been criticising the Conservative government on this issue, yet they themselves haven't proposed an alternative. And in my eyes, I think that's really bad. That's a really bad opposition in that sense. So I find that, yes, it's created a good conversation. However, I think there needs to be more solutions and more ideas on this in terms of addressing this, very important problem that exists within the United Kingdom right now.
Got you. Robin, I saw you nodding there. Do you want to add anything to this?
No, I'm in full agreement, I would say.
Love that. Please go ahead. Oh, the hand raising's back. Oh no.
Yeah, sorry. I wanted to say, I think it was a case in like 1970s or 80s where there was like a serial killer who used to kill women, and one of the informal policies, I'm not sure if it was informal, it was a local policy that said women should stay home right before 9 o'clock to avoid, or 7 o'clock to avoid being attacked, right? And these are kind of the informal policies that we have, because there's formal policies that are like in law or whatever, but there's certain things that we kind of know. Just like when children are outside of under a certain age, we expect children to be at home before 7 or 8 o'clock, or not without an adult, because we're scared that something might happen to them, we might fall into danger. So what is different between those types of informal policies, which says if you know there's a danger outside, you yourself should self-police or encourage people to be like, stay inside, and saying to somebody, if you are more of a threat to someone, you too should stay inside until we solve the problem. It's not either or. If there's an immediate threat, you need to address the immediate threat while you look for long-term solutions. So the immediate threat, if we do think it's a endemic, and we think that actually we do believe that women are in such in such danger, maybe it's a case of going until we find out who the good guys are. Because if you ask the people who are doing sexual harassment and rape, they wouldn't believe necessarily that they're the good guys or they're the bad guys. It's not about being the good or bad guy. If you perceive yourself to do something and it's in line with your train of thought, you might say, I'm a good guy. I didn't know this was the law, or this was not what to do. And if we get into the territory of good and bad, then it's actually more dangerous. It's actually more dangerous to call somebody good or bad because of all their actions all the time. Some people are susceptible to doing bad things, but they're good people, or they're good people and they do end up doing bad things. So for me, it's a case of we actually operate under these kind of ways anyway. But it's easier for us to police the victims and say, you know what? Stay out of danger. The streets are bad. Rather than say, you know what? It's better to make sure the streets aren't scary or dangerous so that they can run freely. So I think it's a way we see things. It's kind of blinding the way we're looking for more creative solutions to this, in my opinion. I think we're very much used to telling victims or people who are vulnerable to stay away from danger rather than addressing the dangers itself and the source of it.
So how do we do that then?
Yeah, I mean,
how do we?
Sorry, go ahead. How do we do what, Hamish?
Yeah, like how do you? Because I completely agree with you. Like, but how do we, in terms of what solutions can get to the root of the issue? That's my question to you. Like, how do we? What are the solutions?
I guess Robin might have solutions, but in terms of conversations like this, where people have to be open to the idea that they are also a threat to other people. You don't become a threat at the point of injuring someone. You become a threat at the point where your mentality or approach or views towards people can put them into danger. If you objectify women in your mind, you're susceptible then to eventually maybe objectify in real life. So it's not about the point at which you actually cause people danger. That's why the conversation about how people take the media intake or conversations or brotherhoods and discussions there, that's where it starts from, because you then become a potential perpetrator. It's also when you hear people tell you that actually there's a threat, you don't use your position and go, I haven't seen this threat, or I don't understand this threat, to undermine that the real threat is there. Those are the ways we do it, like these conversations. It's not about looking at it in terms of, as I said, me versus you, man versus woman, us. If we are really the good people that Aaron talks about, then it's all of us. You should be like, yeah, Hamish should be like, yeah, I don't mind, let men be locked up at 6 p.m. because I'm willing.
Are you suggesting, Basayo, that that policy, ban all men past 6 p.m., you're saying if a man believes and wants to keep women safe, he should support that policy?
No, because I never even said that or alluded to it. What I am saying is that currently, right now, we live with those policies, but in the reverse, which is victims should stay home or not dress a certain way or avoid certain dangers because there's danger out there. So my question is, if you're so angry about that, where is the same energy you're using to then also say, well, I'm outraged by the fact that women have to do X, Y, Z? That's not a real policy that's being proposed. As we've said, and as we understand, it's impossible, more or less. Right? No one wants that, because we do know there's certain things that need to be done in society. There's certain people, not, as we said, not all men do these things. However, if we want us to talk about not all men with legitimacy, then all men have to show a way to kind of actually ask questions that Hamish is asking. What can we do? Then we feel safer to know actually it isn't all men, and that's what we need to do. We need to stop seeing it as a case of like it's a 1-0 for women and 1-0 for men. It's not what it is. It's a society, and we're all interconnected. And even if I'm a woman and you're a man, you still have men and women in your life. I've got brothers. I wouldn't want them home at 6 p.m. just because, I don't think they're a threat. But at the same time, if I'm not doing what I can to make the streets safe, I have to accept that actually certain short-term solutions are going to encroach on their liberty until we're able to make sure liberty for everyone is enjoyed. And that's all I'm saying.
And that's why I personally think education is a massive importance, for example, because I find that, men for far too long haven't held themselves to accountable in terms of this issue. I think for far too long, women, for example, have to, as you've mentioned, dress in a certain way, have their keys out when they're walking back home at night. And quite frankly, I've got sisters, I've got mothers, I've got girlmates. Quite frankly, I can't, I'm sick and tired of this. It's ridiculous, quite frankly. And I think education plays a massive role, but, especially within, let's say, like in schools, if that's like, for example, sex education, for example, is crap United Kingdom right now. You know, it's like with sex education, for example, right? The only thing they teach you is putting a condom on a banana. Like, what the fuck? Like, sorry, excuse my language here, but like, you know what I mean? It's ridiculous. Whereas actually they should be teaching things like, you know, boundaries, like what, you know, not catcalling, and actually like education, I think also plays a massive role. And also the fact that, you know, harsher penalties. Currently, this protest bill that is going on in terms of reading, it has a longer sentence than people who commit rape, for example. That's ridiculous, quite frankly. So education and actually harsher sentences, in my eyes, and people can disagree with it here. And I understand people can disagree with it here, but I think those two things, I think, are major solutions that need to come into play in this issue.
So on this topic of solutions, which is where I want us to go next, and you know, how you make things better, you know, what could work, as it were. I get it. There's a panoply of things that we need to do, but even still thinking about it, education's wonderful. Of course, it's great. You know, detractors might say, well, there's a time lag attached to that. You know, what are we going to do right now to solve what is an issue, so to speak, as well? So one of the things that's been floated is this idea that, okay, well, what about if the government spends $4 million, say, on greater surveillance and lighting? You know, I mean, I remember growing up and traveling home after night vigil because I was a good Christian young boy, and like on my way home, the lights, they might as well not be on because they're so dark that you kind of ask yourself, what's the point of having these things on? So is that the way to go about doing it? Is it greater surveillance? Is it greater, you know, lighting, if you like, in the streets? Besides, there's something interesting, which is about essentially the kind of zeitgeist of the time. You know, trying to slowly re-engineer culture such that, you know, we don't see 9 p.m. as the time where women must go home because it's not safe outside. But it being a shift into a time where everyone can be outside and feel super comfortable. That, of course, takes ridiculous social pressure and a long time to change. So perhaps what are some of the more, you know, short-term solutions you guys have that might make things better?
I think what's interesting, and obviously anyone jump in here, is that unlike other issues that we have in society, this one doesn't have a short-term solution, and we have to be okay with that. What we have to do is understand that if the generations before us had been as committed as we want to be now, we would be living in a different time, hopefully. And we have to, and there's a few things there as well. We have to separate the idea of there's dangers outside, but we're also talking about gender-based violence as well. So it's very different to just saying the time that people are outside, because the time people outside can be dangerous for everyone, but gender-based, there's a conversation that men need to be having as well. As we said, not only men commit crimes, but there's a conversation that men, because I think women are working overtime to also be victims, but also be the protesters, to also educate, to also be exhausted, to also be gaslighted. It takes a toll on you. And sometimes it's very much like, you know what, if you will never experience this, there's only so much I can do. But those of you who are open to the conversation, you play a large role in having that conversation. Number two, the assumption about sexual harassment and gender-based violence happening in the dark is another one we have to get rid of, because there's a lot of things that happen not in the dark or not outside, not with strangers. Being highly surveillant, having surveillance, it might deter a few people. If you know there's cameras, we are already one of the most surveillance countries or the city in the world. Hasn't stopped people from doing it. All that does is maybe penalize you or prosecute you once you've done that task. But what makes you want to commit such a crime is what we need to get to. And it takes a long time, but if you start from today, eventually that day or reckon it will come sooner. But we can't say because the job at hand is so big that we should not approach it. I do think, though, when it comes to this conversation, we do need to have men talking to other men saying, and I think Robin will agree here, where it's a case of people no man is going to talk to you about his perversions really openly. Very few people are like, yeah, when I see that girl, I want to sleep with her straight away. If she cares or not, I'm going to spike her drink. But if you ever hear anyone allude to certain things, is the basis of your friendship about how much that man cares about a woman. Because a lot of men say, you know what, I like him because of old times, or we like football. But if they ever say anything, would you stop being that person's friend? Do they know, actually, I can't talk to Hamish about these things because he will never like me? Or is it a case you kind of make it a situation where it's like, I might not really like it, but, you know, let's go have a drink after, or let's play football. That's the kind of enabling factors that we don't recognize and that we need to address. And it's all those small things, because as we said, these men aren't men who necessarily wake up and stab people and, you know, and watch all these crazy things. Sometimes just based on what you've been socialized to believe is okay, and your concept of how you see a woman means that you're going to treat her a certain way, and people can still vouch for you and say, you're a great man. Wasn't the man who killed Sarah Everard a father and a husband? I'm sure his children might have said, you know what,
Yeah.
I would never see that. So you have to be careful what we see as people's public image and private image, and where we think these things are happening. And if you do believe these things are happening in such a way where it takes a CC camera, then it says a lot about what you understand of this issue.
Yeah. Aaron, what are your thoughts on this? On what we could do moving forward, and perhaps what you think won't work?
Or perhaps we could decriminalize certain weapons or certain tools that people have suggested in order to prevent attacks like this. So, for example, pepper spray, or I hate to say it, knives, or even guns. Decriminalize some self-defense weapons in order to be able to fight back. At least, America has their Second Amendment laws. And if you look in the places in America, for example, that have the strictest gun control, the crime goes up. But the least amount of gun control there is, the crime rate in terms of rape and stuff, that goes down. So that's not a coincidence. So it's not to say that.
Do you mean that the other way around? As in, when there's guns, crime goes down. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm talking like one-on-one crime. I'm talking about things like in the context of self-defense. I'm not talking about like school shootings and things like that. I'm talking about in the context of self-defense. But this is a problem that it's not going to be solved overnight. So I think these are social issues that will take years, if not decades, to overcome. But I don't want to get into. Whilst I understand that it will take a long time, there's also a side of me that does not want to. We have to recognize what is a good man. Basically, a good man is not the same thing as a harmless man. A harmless man is someone that cannot hurt you. A good man is someone who has the power to do something bad but chooses not to. There's an element of trust there when it comes to male and female and the way we interact with each other. And if there's no element of trust based upon what's happened to a lot of women or men, or in this case it's women, then I don't know where we are as a society. It means that we'll be fundamentally an untrustworthy society where no one really trusts each other because this person might have done this or this person might have done that. He could also not have done something. He could also just be a normal person who has a lot of respect for women, but because he's a man, he might automatically get that sort of extra suspicion, basically, as in there are certain stigmas, there are certain crimes that come with a certain stigma that affect different sexes differently. When it comes to men, it seems to be to do with sex-based crimes and stuff like that. So it's a tricky one. There's no overnight solution, but in the short term, I would say perhaps decriminalize weapons, decriminalize certain weapons such as pepper spray. But that's just my thoughts.
So, Bazai, I know you had a response to that, and this idea of kind of giving maybe or decriminalizing some self-defense weapons, and how that may.
I feel like maybe obviously I can't quantify this because in my head, maybe perhaps if people knew that women could defend themselves, it might stop certain men. But however, that is after the act has already been committed, and we can't judge it based on how many deaths we have or how many successful attempts at putting women in danger. It's also about the attempt made. Sexual harassment isn't necessarily about a woman being raped. It's about all the lines before that as well. So you can't judge a situation by the severity of it. It's the fact that situation can be created. So there's no point just saying like let racism continue. What we should do is give people a knife or scissors, so that if they do attempt to lynch you, you can cut yourself off the tree. I don't understand.
This is the thing that I don't understand. When we say the lines that happen before it, like this is what kind of throws me off, because there are things that can seem that will lead to something down the line, but at the end of the day, it could also mean something completely innocent. Like nowadays, myself, for example, I've asked a lot of women what they see as sexual harassment, and usually most of the time I've got the answer as in when a guy or when a person basically is constantly after you and saying then they're interested and you're not interested in blah and all that kind of stuff. I get that, but then some women I've asked them, well, if a man is moving to you, for example, if he's trying to get your number or something and you said no and he's moved on, would you still count that experience as sexual harassment? Would you count the social politics, the attraction between a man and a woman to be harassment? Because I ask some women, they say yes. I ask some women, they say no. So if the law has to be objective, but society is subjective, we have an issue. I mean that some women, if I as a man approach a woman and do So some men can be quite awkward. They don't even know what they're doing. I could approach one woman and move to her. She's not interested. I get the signal and move off, and that will be the end of it. I could approach another woman, and she could be turned off by the whole experience and try charge me for harassment. So there's a line that has to be drawn between the subjective and the objective is what I have the issue with.
The line isn't that thin, Aaron. I think it's a privilege again to talk about all situations to do with women's safety as a thin line. It's not a thin line. If you harass somebody and you do something that they don't want you to do, they didn't invite you to do something, it could be seen as harassment and it might not be seen as harassment. But those are the cases you're looking at are the grey areas. There are a lot more cases that aren't that grey. There are a lot more cases where we're dealing with aren't the fact of actually, I asked for a number, I said harassment. How many cases have actually been filed that have such a thin line? Most of these cases we're talking about is someone relentlessly pursued you, stepped into your space after you told them not to, followed you home. Can we not deal with those cases before we look at actually there's a potential here for a unique or a situation where a small minority of people might call this harassment? If that's what we're dealing with, no one said we should ignore that. Hold on, no one said we should ignore that because these are real things, and at the end of the day, these are real lives. However, in society has always been objective. This is not a new case. In every situation, there's going to be people that say, actually, I interpret this differently. Sexual harassment against women is not new. So if you have this energy in anything else, then fair enough. But reality is, in anything we do, there's always been that conversation about what, as an individual, you find subjective. That's why it's up to you to complain, or if you don't. So I don't understand why this is unique. It's not unique to the situation, in my opinion.
Go on, Robin.
I also, going back on the whole idea of legalizing certain weapons in terms of self-defense, to take it from another angle, I think something that a lot of people almost feel uncomfortable to address is the psychological scarring that being sexually harassed or assaulted can actually leave. So regardless of carrying any sort of weapon, that harm is already going to have been caused. And I don't believe that people in general talk enough about how we are supposed to support victims.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. It's there's so many different parts to this, and it's why it's quite difficult to get it all and fit it all in, because these are conversations that folks need to be having around the dinner table, need to be having with friends. And there's lots of conversations we're kind of having here that really it's for people in their small friendship groups. And there's one thing I've seen particularly that's quite interesting, because we're in a cultural moment right now with the advent of the Me Too movement not too long ago, and more discussions like this taking place, where I do think in my friendship group at least more people have been talking about sexual assault, sexual violence, gender violence, things like that, which can only be a positive, but we're talking about it more. One thing that's also transpired that I've seen online is, there's discussion to be had about what Aaron's saying, and I think that's a slightly different conversation. But here's something I want to close on. Online, we're seeing more and more women exposing men for previous acts of sexual harassment, right? And when that happen on Twitter, we're seeing that happen, on TikTok, even folks saying, "Here's what's happening." And this idea of social justice and exposure is something that we've thought about at great deal. And I know I've made it gendered, but it's really non-gender, as you can imagine, because anyone can assault anybody. But what are your thoughts on that and how it takes place online? As you've observed some of these kind of lists being put up, we saw that happen a few years ago. What do you think about this new way of getting justice, if you like, or social justice, so to speak, about these acts? Does that make sense? Hamish, we'll start with you, and then we'll get some thoughts from other people before we move on.
Yeah, I think it's a good question to ask. I find that it is good because it creates that conversation, and it creates that sort of movement like the Me Too to try and have these experiences shared and to say like this is unacceptable. However, what I kind of have my doubts on is like why. I understand the logic of why they're going online is because of why can't they go towards the police? I know the reason why, because I don't want to say I know the reason why as someone who is cis and white male, but it's because of the fact there's this lack of trust towards the police to go towards the police to say, look, I've been, I've had this done to me, right? I don't want to say like I say for people who have had that experience, but I think it's maybe because of that they are going online because of what's happened, because they don't feel the police has that trust anymore. And I think that's why they're going online to share these experiences. And it kind of questions like, well, they shouldn't do that. Well, I mean, They should do that because they're within a society that has forced them to do so. But we shouldn't. We actually have to question. Well, hold on. Surely they should be going to the police on this, and surely we have to look at the police itself and think that they actually need to do this in that sense to actually look in terms of their institution to solve this issue, rather than these people going online to share these experiences. These experiences should be going to the police. That's the ultimate aim for it. But of course, we know why that's happening right now.
Got you. What are your thoughts on this? I'm curious to hear from Josiah or Robin on this before we go to Aaron.
I would say that a lot of the coming forward online in terms of like large groups of women or victims in general, they find strength in unity, I suppose, and also building on the whole police are very demonized, and for very obvious reasons. That's a whole other topic, but it is just kind of like, for example, last week with Sarah Everard, her murderer, the man who's accused is a police officer, and it's kind of like at her vigil, then a few days later, police officers were getting very hands-on with women in the dark, and it's just kind of like, how are we supposed to turn to these people? Maybe doing it around other people who you feel that can relate or that can support you a little bit more gently is a much more comfortable place to start. Obviously, I think everyone's aim is to end up with a system where people can come forward and get justice for what is going on.
Yeah, I think following from that, I think this is just the natural transition from entering, the technological social media big data world, where it's an extension of your real life. It's another tool you can use to voice your opinion. In isolation, as people have said, it can seem very strange and very extra, especially if you don't know what part of the internet that person is coming from. So you judge it by your side of the internet. You think this person is quite extreme, but if you know where they operate and their group of friends, you'll be like, actually, it's just part of a wider context which they operate in. And I think that's where a lot of the conversation gets lost. But also, this is natural. It's always happened like this. People start making movements from whoever they see like-minded individuals. And again, it's just that social media is a less quite regulated place. So therefore, you can't discern between what you think is truth or fact. You don't know the character of the person talking. So there's a lot of, conversations about actually, how can we trust you? And it also opens up a lot more harm that could be due if there's, as someone said, false allegations. It opens up a lot more. So we can't have these movements online, but also saying actually there is a potential to misprosecute or have false allegations. So I think they should be done in conjunction with each other. Anytime there's a new platform or a new way of doing things, it also comes with its own dangers as well as its own pros. But I think hopefully as time moves on, we're able to have more conversations about this in a more realistic way. But also, don't forget, we've been in a pandemic, and there's no coincidence why a lot of what some of the biggest moves we've had have happened during a time where everyone's online and everyone's voice seems to be amplified online. If people were going to work and it was a normal, normal gatherings, there might be different types of conversations happening or where we gather. So I think we need to look at, it's a specific time in our lives, it's a particular context. But we also need to make sure that we can't just say someone complains about somebody that's true. We do have to there must be procedures in place that allows them to also declare their innocence and have and Twitter or Instagram can't be judge and jury. That's not our role. Our role is to highlight issues and to at least have a conversation. It can't be a case where someone says this person did this to me and it's like, yes, you're innocent or you're guilty. It's not. It's to give that victim a voice. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I take point, absolutely. Aaron, last word on this. What are your thoughts when you reflect?
It's not to say that it's not to undermine women's experiences when it comes to sex and rape and stuff, because I think the act of sex and rape and sexual assault is a disgusting act fundamentally. However, the aspect of doing it online, depending on how it's done, can easily be weaponized. So it's not. It is possible for the two to coexist. It is possible for you to go online and share your experiences, have a unity in like a collective group where people have had similar experiences and you can come together and support. That's fine. But then when he crossed that line, when he put out for the whole world to see that this man did X to me, for example, without any kind of due process, especially when it comes against men, because of the stigma that comes with sexual accusation that you just cannot get rid of as a man. A lot of people are not really into that. Some things can easily be weaponized. Some people can piggyback off of a good movement, which is what I think, in my opinion, the Me Too movement has done. Some people have piggybacked off of it and used it to say, well, you know, this guy did this to me. Not to do a sexual assault, but he did this to me, therefore he wronged me in some way, therefore I'm going to accuse him of doing this and he'll ruin his life altogether. You've seen it how many times, especially in America, where a lot of women weaponize the belief, the trust that comes with sexual assault accusations, and it kind of ruins people's lives. And you know, as a man, you kind of have to be extra careful now, and I don't think it's necessarily a good thing that you can run a society via fear. You know, the idea that only the good men have nothing to fear is not true at all. It's a myth. Anyone can get it. I know people myself who have been falsely accused of rape, and it wasn't a good experience for them. The idea that you don't have to be guilty in the age of social media. And it's as simple as that. You don't have to be actually guilty to be guilty, and that's just the truth of it. So, you know,
I mean, it's a delicate tension. Thank you so much to all our guests. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you so much, Hamish. Thank you so much, Robin, for getting involved in this one. It's a very kind of dicey topic, isn't it? God, my head's quite low here. It's a very dicey topic, isn't it? Because of course, you know, social media is the difficulty with it is its amplification tool. So when you're dealing with something that's often is complex, like sexual assault and what's actually happening in investigations and stuff like that, to put it online on Twitter, you know, for 20,000 people tweet, the damage is often already done, whether that person is found quote unquote innocent or not. But again, I think it's a sideshow. Of course, the key thing here is about considering all these different ways that we can keep women safer, and we've gone through quite a bit of them today. And of course, you know, we never purported to solve, you know, gender relations and gender and the way different genders coexist in this one stream. This is very much to get you thinking, to get you talking, to get you discussing, and I hope it's done that. Basayo, thank you so much. I mean, what are your last thoughts? I know we've gone a bit over time, but you know, what are your last thoughts as we wrap up?
I think my last thoughts is just that it's quite difficult when I think a particular group of people experience certain things, because it not only kind of isolates your experience to your experience. It's difficult for you then to share and tell people that actually this is what I'm going through, because it requires a level of empathy that sometimes requires you to go through that thing. And I think that's what we're battling right now. If you don't really experience it or something like that, it's difficult for you to put yourself in that position. But also, I think what men most of the time are worried about is the freedoms that they have now look like their liberties are being encroached upon, because it requires them to change what they thought were freedoms. And maybe what men were experiencing now, or any privileged group experience now, should someone say in the name of justice, we need to change the way you operate. If you see that as a form of oppression, then there's a problem. But if you see it as a form of actually, maybe I was enjoying, or maybe not enjoying is the wrong word, but maybe I was experiencing a certain way of life that actually threatened others. You know what? That's not their fault individually. It's society. We all did it. Men and women contribute to toxic behaviors and engage in it. But if there is a change in it, you have to think about, is it because I fundamentally think morally this is a bad idea? Or do I believe that actually I don't like what it means for what I determine to be my liberties? And I think that's an honest conversation that people need to have. And of course, as they say, oppression always feels, you know, justice always feels like oppression to those who enjoyed the privileges. And we all have to do it. You know, if you're a straight person, if you're a rich person, there'll be times where, you know, I don't want to see it as a zero-sum game, but to kind of change things and rectify things, you might actually have to experience the idea of giving up some of that power or giving up some of that privileges so everyone else can. And that's all I think we're dealing with right now. It's a growing pain of a society where culture changes before the law does.
Absolutely. It'll be very interesting to see obviously what policies are advanced. I mean, like I said, the government's already talking about lighting and talking about all these things, and whether that's going to be the solution or something else will be interesting. I think we're going to do another stream about patriarchy, because that was said quite a few times today. And I would love to do a exploring the depths of that, but maybe that's not for now. But I'm looking forward to that one. It should be very, very interesting. Folks, if you've enjoyed the stream, I mean, just hit the subscribe button, turn your notification bell on so you can find out when we have other streams. Of course, we have lots and lots and lots of content coming out this week. So please keep sharing. We're on our road to 1,000 subscribers. So if you want to help us out with that, then copy this link, share it with a friend of yours, share it with the men in your life, share it with the women in your life, share it with everyone else too. And just let's try and get as many people talking as possible. Comment your thoughts out. But as ever, I've been Mike, and we've had Bosiah with us, and we look forward to seeing you in the next stream. Thank you very much for watching.